Where in the draft could the Dallas Cowboys find some help at defensive tackle? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on
Cowboys.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are talking about some defensive tackles in this year's class. And I got to say, if you want a defensive tackle after round one, it's not great.
You better be looking for a specific type. You know, like you better be looking for guys that have pretty serious warts that you're going to develop, or that you have a very serious plan for. I will say that, you know, before we kind of dive into these guys specifically, one of the benefits of having someone like Dan Quinn as your defensive coordinator is that, you know, all these guys, even the tweener types, are very eligible for us because Dan Quinn can find a role for these guys to get in and be able to play at any number of techniques up and down the line. So I 100% agree with you that the pickings are slim after day two. But I would say for the Cowboys that they are probably better than most teams.
Yes.
Simply because they can use almost any of these body types somewhere on their defensive line, whereas other teams may have to be very specific about what type of defensive lineman they're drafting.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about three different guys that we know the Cowboys have interest in. And let's start, Landon, with a guy from LSU, Jaquelin Roy. I want to make sure I get the name right. Jaquelin Roy. He's a junior, decided to declare early. I think he's probably the highest rated of the three guys we're going to talk about today. What did you see when you turn on the tape?
Well, I really feel like this is a guy who, he is the biggest of these guys, right?
Yeah.
He's definitely the kind of the truest of defensive tackle of this group. I mean, I would say he's, kind of a tweener a little bit between a nose tackle. And look, we'll talk about Tyler Lacy and his kind of tweener status a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a guy who is purely a defensive tackle who could be either a nose, maybe give you some three technique. 6'2", 3/4, 305. He's got kind of, he's a short, very thick. I mean, he looks like he's an overstuffed sausage.
Yeah.
Like
I like it.
He's shocked. It's shocking that he's only 300 pounds when you look at him because he's so like just every part of him looks like it's bursting out of muscle or whatever it is. He's got a longer torso and kind of short legs. So he's got like a kind of naturally lower center of gravity. Very powerful player. Played a ton this year for LSU. I think that's the thing that kind of stuck out to me. And actually going and reading The Beast yesterday when it came out, this is something that Dane pointed out as well, that I noticed that this guy consistently played 50-plus snaps.
Yeah,
like,
a lot.
Averaged 50-plus snaps this season as a defensive tackle and a nose tackle. That's a ton, man.
It's too many, guys, to be honest.
Well, I mean, he was able to hold up. And the fact is that he was able to play that many snaps. Like, I think it shows good endurance for a guy that size.
Look, compare that to, like, obviously he's not this player, but like Jordan Davis last year coming out of Georgia, I believe averaged 21 snaps a game. This guy was almost tripling that, 51.9 snaps per game. I
mean, even Jalen Carter, like all those Georgia guys, I mean, because they're so talented, they rotated those guys so much. They didn't play Jalen Carter maybe played as many snaps in his career as this guy played last year for LSU. I mean, that's how many snaps he played. He has good lateral quickness, I thought, for a man his size. He does not change direction well. Like, he's not a guy who's going to bend any corners or anything.
Did you see his agility times, by the way?
Oh, I mean, it's like they had to use a sundial. Yeah, basically.
A 500 short shuttle
Yeah.
and an 801 three cone.
I knew it was an 8+ a 3 cone. So yeah, I mean that shows you. I will say though, despite that, like what he can do is he's not gonna like stop and change directions, but what he can do is if he gets going one direction, he can like very suddenly shift tracks, like and then suddenly be like instead of going this direction, like slightly alter the angle, which can like throw off offensive linemen's momentum at times. So that you'll see him kind of backdoor some blocks with surprising quickness for a guy his size. Loves to club swim. You'll see him throw that almost all the time. Not explosive enough to be a full-time 3 technique, I don't think.
I certainly don't think he's a 3.
He can get surprisingly skinny through the holes for a guy his size. But he, and that's why I think you see him kind of. There's some 3 technique aspects to him, but he just doesn't have the kind of explosiveness that you would want that guy playing there full time. He leaves his feet too often. That's ultimately my problem with him, is that he negates his own best traits by, he thinks he's he thinks he's more of a finesse player than he is. He needs to like be a power player, set his feet and drive people back into the pocket, not try to be this dancing bear that he isn't. Where does he win? I think he's a pinballing defensive tackle, nose tackle type. You just see him bouncing around constantly. He has pretty good injury. My unanswered question is, can you put 10 pounds of pure muscle on this guy and lean him into nose tackle? Because that's where I feel like his skill set lies. I think he would be good as a kind of 315, 320 pound nose tackle who can give you a little bit of push, but
yes,
I don't really love him necessarily in the NFL playing a bunch of snaps as a 3 technique.
Yeah, and I don't love him as a nose tackle either, because you can watch him take on double teams and he just doesn't hold up very well at the point of attack. So where does that guy fit in on this defense, right? Like if you're the Cowboys, you need to either have a guy that get up the field and create pressure, or you need the guy that can hold up against a double team. So where does he fit?
I think like early on, like I think what you do is you have to kind of just play him as your bottom of the rotation defensive lineman. You plug him in as a 3 technique. You plug him in as a nose. I mean, I just think you can play him at 3 technique. Just I wouldn't expect a bunch of pass rush.
No, that's the thing. I think he's going to be your 3 technique. I think like on early downs, to give you some run stopping ability. To be honest, it reminds me a lot of. This is a better version of that. But you remember Harrison Phillips, who was with Stanford and kind of bounced around the league, but that where not really a nose tackle or a 1 technique, but it kind of has the body of a 3 technique. But like Phillips, he plays really hard and he plays a lot. So that is valuable.
Yeah, I think that's why this is a perfect kind of day 3 guy, right? Like he's good enough to play. And he's good enough to give you okay snaps. He's just not going to be someone that you're like dying to insert into the lineup. But if you're at the middle towards the end of the season, you've got your defensive tackles and you're trying to limit their snaps, their exposure, this is a good guy to throw out there to kind of eat up a bunch of snaps and just give you decent high floor play. He probably won't screw things up for you. So that's the kind of guy that you're looking for here at this part of the draft.
I will say I do like him better than some of the other LSU defensive tackles that have come out the last couple of years.
I agree.
Last year was Neil Farrell, who was a nose tackle that couldn't move. A couple of years ago was Tyler Shelvin, another nose tackle that couldn't move. He's better than those guys. I'm not sure how much better. That's the only issue. Let's talk about somebody else, another defensive tackle that just had a boatload of production at Bowling Green. When we get back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there are no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up so you can place your first bet and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Today's a great day to be a sports bettor. We've got NBA playoffs, obviously baseball. We've got hockey going on right now. We're getting closer to the playoffs. There's some more golf tournaments coming up. Don't miss your chance at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official betting partner of the Major League Baseball. All right, Landon, let's talk about Carl Brooks. Somebody who, man, was he productive at Bowling Green. I just citing Dane Brugler's notes, led Bowling Green in sacks for 5 different seasons, which never really happens. But what was your take on the player when you put on the film?
I felt like this guy is. I was wondering how he got to Bowling Green. He's physically looks so different than all the rest of their players. Yes. It's ridiculous. He's tall, thick athlete who is definitely built like a smaller defensive tackle than a defensive end. The kind of funny thing about the conversation around this player is that it started out with him being kind of listed as a defensive end. And as the draft process has gone on, you've seen him listed as a tweener. And now finally it feels like more and more teams are coming around to the idea of him being a defensive tackle. I tend to think that that's his best spot, but he lined up all over for Bowling Green. I mean, he spent a ton, way too many snaps, as far as I'm concerned, standing up on the outside, trying to rush the passer. As I think it's just because he was far and away their best player. They had to find ways to kind of just move him around to exploit his skill set. But I really feel like this is a guy who has a lot of physical traits, that you like, that he needs kind of to focus on one position, because even though he has some physical traits that you like, it's not like he is some unworldly athlete.
No, I think he's a very average athlete.
He's a very average athlete, but I think he has the traits that you want if you could develop him at one position and have him become sort of a technician. You could see how he could avail himself of being a very strong technical 3 technique, but his skill set isn't there yet because he's kind of been spread out all over the field.
Yes.
But you see it like. He gets too high off the snap. He has this incredible body control and athleticism that you see on tape, but he doesn't have the technique to kind of really show that out. And you see that when he plays. Like I think I saw him versus, I think it was Ohio State, maybe. Like he played a couple of different. They played a couple of different Division I teams that are legit, and I watched some of those games, and when you see it against like that, those kind of Division I athletes, that kind of freelancing athleticism just doesn't work on those guys. No. But that doesn't mean that he didn't still get his snaps. Like he got some positive snaps. So there's something here with this guy. But it is kind of a weird mixture because, like I said, he has some traits. They aren't very well developed. And he doesn't have like this kind of overwhelming athleticism that makes you feel like, I got to get this guy in and I got to try to develop him. So he's kind of this like neither nor situation.
Well, on top of that, he's not like the size isn't great. 6'3", 296, 31.5-inch hands.
That's the real problem, right? Like the 31-inch arms that's where he really gets, because he has explosive traits. I mean, the testing numbers don't quite show what I think you see on film, right? Sure. Like you see a guy who can get off the ball. You see a guy who's explosive and strong. He had an 8-foot broad jump and 7.633 3-cone. I tend to think that he's a little bit more explosive than he tested. But even then, like I said, because of the short arms, it kind of limits him. You can't really. This isn't a guy that you necessarily could play outside and have him reduce and
no, he's not going to be a base end or anything like that.
He's got to play on the inside, and then he's got to also kind of become more developed as a hand technician in order to overcome his lack of length as a 3 technique.
I just don't know where he fits in on this defensive line, right? And that's. I would have a problem spending any valuable pick on Carl Brooks, even though I like the production. The production is insane. It's just, is he even active for you as a rookie? Like, is he even getting snaps in the rotation, or is he somebody you're developing? And if that's the case, I kind of want to develop somebody with a little bit more physical tools and traits than Carl Brooks. It's not to say I hate the player, but I think he needs to probably be like a 5th or 6th round pick. Like that's probably where you take this guy, right?
I honestly that's kind of where I view this guy day 3. I I would not at all. Look, I mean, the normal path for this guy is he catches on with the team. He maybe he makes the team or plays a couple years, gets released, kind of is just a body in the NFL that rotates. I think that there's also the chance that this guy gets completely overlooked by the NFL because of exactly what you just described, right? Where he's got a lot of developing that he needs to do, and he's not the type of athlete that you usually invest in to develop, right?
Yes.
I could see a situation where he goes to a team, is forgotten at the back end of the roster, and then suddenly develops into a really good pass rusher because you're right. He doesn't have the testing is not off the charts. The arms are not short. The arms are short, and that's a problem. But the kind of athleticism, body control stuff that he does naturally that allowed him to play on the outside as a stand-up defensive end, that stuff is stuff you can't necessarily teach. So he has that in spades. If he was able to get onto a team and develop a little bit, I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up as a rotational starter for some team. I think that there is upside here, but I agree. He kind of falls in between that spot of, great production, but at a small school. And he's got some traits to develop, but he isn't quite the athlete. It's like a neither nor situation, right?
Right. Yeah. So it feels like somebody who might have to bounce on and off practice squads and on active rosters. And it's kind of always somewhere between like that 48th and 55th guy on your roster. But so I could see 2 years down the road, once he gets some NFL coaching, once he cleans up some of the technique, he gets a little bit more controlled in his rushes. Yeah. As you mentioned, like somebody who you feel very comfortable giving 21 snaps a game, in a rotation. I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about another defensive lineman because, as we mentioned at the top, the depth of this defensive tackle class is not great. So what you might see, Landon, is teams trying to create defensive tackles. Let's talk about another guy next. This episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM app. You've heard about us talk about this game before. It's so much fun. I've been playing it the last few weeks. It's absolutely incredible. It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build an historic dynasty. With Ultimate Football GM, you are responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise. You're going to hire the right coaches and the coordinators, hopefully. You have to manage the finances. You have to negotiate player salaries and terms. You'll have free agency, the draft. There's going to be player locker room issues that pop up, personnel issues, all in the ups and downs of the season. All of this in a challenging but realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want to and when you want to. Locked On Cowboy listeners will get a 100% free boost to the franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, all in caps, in the game store. That is Locked On, all in caps. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Landon, the last guy that we're going to talk about who the Cowboys have met with ahead of the 2023 NFL Draft is Tyler Lacy, a defensive lineman from Oklahoma State. What are your notes on him?
Yeah, he's a really interesting player, and this is the kind of guy that it feels like the Cowboys, the type of player the Cowboys kind of will value maybe more than some of these other teams, right? He's a very oddly shaped person. He's stands at 6'4", 280-ish. I think he was 279.
283 at the pro day. Yep.
283 at the pro day. Okay. So 33 and a quarter inch arms. He's got, some decent length, wingspan 78. So under 79 inches, not necessarily a fast player. He ran a 5.15 40 at 280, which is
not great.
11-inch
hands though. That's massive hands.
Yes, absolutely massive hands. And also, pretty decent vertical jump. Broad jump was okay. 3-cone was not great. So, I mean, you kind of, and look, those athletic testing numbers, we use them often to kind of confirm or expose or find out what more that we can get from tape. And, usually what you'd like to see is the testing kind of confirm what you see on tape. Mm-hmm. Like I see a fast player, he runs a fast 40 time. I see a guy who can change direction well. He runs a good 3-cone and short shuttle. This is a guy whose tape kind of matches what what the athleticism is. I see a guy physically is like a Michael Bennett starter kit, right?
Yeah.
He's strong, thick upper body with bird legs. He's got like long, thin, and not to talk too much about another man's body, but he's kind of has that classic, watch out, Saban, big butt that you want in those defensive linemen. But from there, it's like poles. It's like he's walking on poles. So.
Mm-hmm.
He engages early with his hands. He aims to get his hands into the OL's chest early. He's good with leverage when he gets his pad level right. He can really move folks and control the edge. He's not nimble enough as a pass rusher on the edge. So to me, like his body is, he was very miscast there at Oklahoma State as far as I'm concerned. He can control the edge, but I don't want him bending on the edge.
No,
I mean, he very clearly has that kind of outside inside defensive line skill set, right?
Yes.
Where you like him on the outside to control the edge in the run game, but when it's time to rush the passer, get him inside, have him rushing over in the B gap,
or get him off the field.
Or get him off the field, maybe. I mean, I think he could do some stuff as like an interior defensive lineman who's on twist, especially in our kind of system. I think he could be valuable here, and he is a good hand fighter. Like I will give you that. Like he grabs wrists, he denies punches. And if anything, he maybe does that too much. There's like a little bit too much of just him standing there and fighting with the guy when he should be kind of working on getting around him.
Well, that's why I wondered like if he should be like a 5 technique in the NFL.
Well, I started to think that too, but you know what? I saw a couple of reps where he was playing on the goal line, and in those reps, like they were just asking him to fire off low and get off and destroy the guy who's in front of him. And those were some of the best reps I saw from him when he was able to just penetrate, disrupt, and blow up plays by kind of creating friction in the B gaps. That's where I felt like he actually showed me something. So I don't disagree with you in the idea that like I think this guy easily could be drafted as a 5 tech. I think teams that have 3-4s that even run base 3-4s at this point would be interested.
Dallas sometime.
Well, that's true. Which is Dallas. And Dallas. Well, I mean, Dallas definitely has a role for a 5 technique. I mean, that's that's just part of the defense that they run. Not necessarily a 3-4, but a 5 tech is part of what they get there.
Yeah.
I think that this guy, has some ability to play in those kind of pure 3-4 defenses. But I do also think that he could be a guy at the bottom of your roster who you could throw in a whole bunch of different techniques. He could play 3, he could play 5, he could play 7 if you need him to on early downs. But I do think that he still has a ways to go as a pass rusher. I think if you're gonna use him in that situation, you're mostly going to be using him inside, and I think mostly as the spike, mostly as a guy who is destroying blockers as opposed to the person taking advantage of the destroyed blocks.
He actually reminds me of somebody the Cowboys had. Oh, man, it's probably been 4 years now. Do you remember Jihad Ward when the Cowboys traded? I think it was Ryan Switzer for Jihad Ward. Now, it didn't work out for Dallas, but Ward is still – I think he's on the Giants now and actually played pretty well last year. That's the type of player that I could see where probably not a starter, but somebody who is just – long, plays with good leverage, can fight your offensive tackles if you need them to fight it, and can give you some pretty decent runs, snaps if you need them there.
Yeah, Jihad Ward's a great example because if you remember, Jihad Ward came into the league like as a 300-pound nose tackle. I mean, or not nose tackle, but a 3 technique. Like that was where people were trying to figure out what to do with them. They just they thought that there was talent there. There's athleticism there. They couldn't quite figure it out. I'm pretty sure that he plays outside linebacker for the Giants.
He plays basically he plays sometimes like the 7 technique, pretty wide out for the Giants. But I could see him doing something similar to that in the NFL.
And I guess that's where I am too with Lacy, is that his fit may not be natural to what you see with his body type, but I think he has NFL football player traits. He like I said, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to play on his feet. He knows how to use his hands. Those are all very valuable traits. I'd love to see a situation where he's asked to play with his pad level low and get off the ball and just disrupt a little bit more. But I do think that he can do, like you said, he could do some of the 2-gapping stuff if you needed to. He can do that for a 3-4 team. So I liked him. But I mean, this is definitely a day 3 guy.
Yeah, it's a 5th or 6th round pick. It's so fascinating that the Cowboys have looked at 3 of these guys and they're all different, right?
Yeah.
Like they all look and play different. And it's one of these things where the further you get into this draft, man, you're going to have to find specific roles for like a Carl, Brooks or a Roy or a Tyler Lacy, right? So I just struggle with this defensive line class. That's all.
I listen, and I think what's happening here is that the Cowboys are trying to take advantage of that, right? Because I don't think you're alone, and I don't think you're alone at all in kind of looking at these guys and going, I don't know how they necessarily fit. I don't see a NFL wide role, especially for some of these guys. Like it's a very specific fit, and for the Cowboys, they have so many different body types, personnel fits that they can drop these buckets that they can drop these guys into. That Tyler Lacy may be a very confusing evaluation for some team that runs a 3-4 that's very straightforward, or even a 4-3 that's very straightforward. For the Cowboys, they look at Tyler Lacy like, oh, he can come in, he can play 5 for us. We can reduce him down as a 3 tech. Like, I really do feel like the Cowboys have gotten a lot better, especially at the defensive line, of looking at what these players do well as opposed to what they can't do, and then fitting them into those buckets so that they're useful for the team overall.
I agree. It's going to be interesting to see when the Cowboys decide to draft a defensive lineman, because we know they will. Is it in the 1st round? Maybe Benton from Wisconsin interests them in the 2nd or 3rd round, or maybe they'll just wait and grab one of these guys and throw them in the rotation. We shall see. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Now make your second listen, the Locked On NFL Scouting Show with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'd like to thank you for listening to our show. Please check us out on YouTube. We post shows every single day over there. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you guys next time.